Hey, I'm Sam and I do design, and in the video today, I'm showing you how to make this soothing scene in Keyshot. This is an animation that I've wanted to try for a really long time. I think that rain running down this window pane is a really simple but effective way to change what would have been an otherwise quite nice still image and brought so much life and intrigue and atmosphere into the scene with very little effort. Now, I've already tried to record this tutorial 3 times, so I'm going to try and speed through this as fast as I can without missing anything. I think I'm well practiced in showing my process for this effect. Now, this, I don't think, is going to be an official tutorial. I would describe this as how I did this effect. I'm not going to go through and explain every little detail. I think there's quite a lot here to get through. But essentially, let's take a look at our scene and see how everything is set up, okay? So this is an interior scene that I've used fairly regularly over the last few years, purely because once I have the scene set up and I can look at it from different angles and I can have these baffles here that I can move away if need be. Okay, so these planes, I can move these if I need a camera to go there. It's kind of like a film set, right? I have this door set up and it kind of looks like a mess with all of these planes everywhere. And what I'm using for the background through the window is this plane right out in the distance with a picture on there that's set to emissive. Okay, so all that's going to do is just send out a flat image right the way through to our camera plane. So we have some nice rain set up on the window panes, and it's set up in a really simple way. Okay, so I have prioritized low render times in favor of needing to set this up and composite this in After Effects later on. So what I could have done, for example, is ran this whole animation all in one go and rendered out every single frame as a full frame as it is like this, but that would have taken weeks, I think, even on my fairly powerful PC. So I've gone ahead and made some cheats to try and save on rendering time, and that's what I'm going to go through today. Now, these window panes that I've got set up here, okay, so this is where the first cheat is. These window panes are not 3D geometry. It's not double glazing with material thickness. It's just a single plane that I have glass material applied to, okay? So I'm using a glass solid material, and the reason why I'm using glass solid is because I want to change the attributes that the regular glass doesn't allow me to do. So let me explain by coming up over here, center and fit, and we'll zoom in. Now, in order to get a rain animation, what I've done is downloaded a rain animation. I found this scene on Shutterstock, and I'll be honest, all I needed was a low enough resolution so that you see something happening on the pane of glass, okay? Now, it's so resolution, and I just got the try before you buy Shutterstock video. When this res is up high enough, you can actually still see the Shutterstock logo as the, because it's part of the texture, right? Now, this is just for me. This is just for my little experiment over the weekend. If a rendering client came to me and said, I need you to render our product in an interior and it needs to have this animation in the background, of course, I would scope and I would spec the cost of the animation into that project and I would buy it for real. But for now, I just need the low res version just to see some things happening on this pane of glass. Anyway, what I'm doing is instead of using bump maps and displacement maps and all sorts of highly intensive calculations that Keyshot would need to do, I'm just telling Keyshot to take the data from this video and changing the attributes of the glass. Okay, so what I would do, I would come down to textures, video map, add my video. So I'd come in here, choose one of the videos that I've got. Then Keyshot will generate all of the frames for you. So you don't need to do that. Keyshot does it. And when you have all of the frames in there, it's going to cycle through each of those frames as you render, okay? These frames correspond to these animation attributes down here. So each of these is a video that I've uploaded into this scene. I've forgotten what I've spoken about, what I've explained, and what is in a previous take. So bear with me if I forget. All I'm doing is taking the video data and changing primarily the refractive index. Okay, so the refractive index is how light goes from the sun outside, travels through the air, gets to the glass, and goes through the glass. And in doing so, that changes direction. Then when it pops out inside the room, it changes direction again and goes into the camera. So the refractive index number is the mathematical codes, it's the physics that dictate how much light bends. So all I've done is I've added in this color to number node, and I've Googled what is the refractive index of water, and that was 1.33. And then I've Googled what is the refractive index of glass, and it's 1.5, I think it was 1.51, I can't remember. I might have changed that by mistake. As long as it's vaguely these numbers, it should be fine. All that's doing is, if I disable the fancy stuff later, what that's doing is saying that the white areas from this video are going to be water and the black areas from this video are going to be glass, okay? And now it doesn't look great as it is right now as a single frame, because if I scroll in, we're not getting really realistic water drops. And this, some of it's quite squarish. Maybe that's down to the fact that this is a really low resolution sample. But still, I wouldn't use this to really zoom in and see. But it's great if I zoom out and take a look. Now, the next thing is to simulate condensation. And all condensation is on glass is it turns it slightly frosted. Okay, so again, what I'm going to do is add this color to number from the same video, and in that goes to the roughness. And that is exactly the reason why we need to use glass solid and not just regular glass, because that gives us these extra inputs that we can change. So I'm going to hit C on the keyboard, scroll in, double check we're still recording. Still recording there. Still recording there. Great. We'll hit C on the keyboard. We can clearly see the Shutterstock logo here. Oops. Don't tell them. I'll buy it next time when the client's paying me. But anywhere that the image is black is going to be perfectly smooth, perfectly transparent and translucent. Anywhere where the image is slightly lighter, that's where we're going to have this frosted effect, okay? So in doing so, that gives us this really misty condensation style scene, just as it's like first thing in the morning, it's cold outside, we're getting condensation on the window, but then as the rain goes through, it's cleaning off that condensation and becoming perfectly clear again. Now, like I said, these video files correspond to each of these, and you might think, oh, why have you got so many video files here? And well, actually, that's because I am using each of these panes of glass as it's a completely different part, completely different material. And not only that, I've gone through and duplicated those parts to fill the next window pane. And then, for example, I've rotated it around 180 so that the Shutterstock image is reversed. And then I've also gone ahead as a final option, and if I click on this video file, come down to the FPS, I've changed this FPS from anywhere between 20 and 30 frames per second. Now, all of that is to try and get away from the fact that this image texture is the same across all 6 window panes. And I've staggered the start of each of those video files here. And in doing so, I hope breaks any sense of pattern and breaks any sense of repeatability across all of the window frames. Okay, so I wanted these to look really, really quite random. So I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about in terms of the window panes. The next thing I had to do was set the lighting material for this gantry light. This is my 3D printed light available on the gantry website. It's made from plant-based polymers. It's basically sugarcane polymers. Really good for the environment. You can buy it. They ship to Canada and the US. But all I've gone ahead and done for the lighting section is added in this color fade. So I go from black and I go all the way up to 2700 Kelvin. And that's going to, you can see that here. So if I add the animation in the material graph, it pops up down here. And now as we scroll through, we can see that the light goes on really bright. Now, like I said, it would be silly to render every single frame as it is right now, okay? It would also be really silly to render the entire scene with frosted glass that the sun is trying to burst through, okay? Glass is not great to render in Keyshot, full stop. If you're rendering light through glass, it's going to slow things down. If you're going to render frosted glass and have light come through frosted glass, your render times will be insane. And you can even see these fireflies beginning to appear right down in the bottom because it's going to take a very long time to render. So to fix that, I had the scene set up with not glass solid with a frosting applied, but actually regular glass that speeds up rendering times and allows me to have a much cleaner rendering effect. Okay, so this is going to render up so much faster and become a lot cleaner and clearer than having the frosted glass. So this is now set up in the way that I would render, and you can see I have my back plate. This is what I rendered previously. Now I only need this as one image. All of the animation can be done using regions like this. So I would render region. I would turn back on the water for all of the different panes. Let's say I've done that. This is the third time I'm doing it. I'm not going through and changing everything. And then I would come up to render and animation. And here is where we can set our frames. Okay, so I would go to and say, all right, well, the first video goes from about here. And I would say, all right, so I need frame 91. Let's say 91 or 100, whatever. And then I can go up to about 598, okay? That's pretty much all I need to make sure that all of the videos are captured and we don't start looping things. Because what's gonna happen, if we get to the end of the video and then loop it in After Effects later on, it's going to jump and stutter as it loops back, and we don't want that. So I would render these as PNG. Frames output only. I don't want the video output because I'm just doing that in Illustrator later on. And actually, I can do that at a relatively low sample rate. So I'm using GPU rendering. So it reses up quite quickly, but you might need more renders samples to get it nice and smooth. I'm only using about 500, whereas this image here, I think that one was about 2000. Okay, so that's going to be the difference. Now, the reason being is because glass renders out really quickly, but anything that is lighting behind that is rendering really slowly. Now, I'm not going to use the plant pot and the plant from any of these frames. I'm just going to use the plant pot from this one scene, and we're going to use clown masks to clown and sort of clipping mask out just the window that we need. Okay, and you can see that here. I've generated that earlier on. So in order to get a clown mask, you just come over to render out a still image, tick clown, and then render out that scene. And then in Photoshop, I just selected just the glass pieces and then exported that as its own PNG. Okay, I think we're all caught up. So with all of the window frames rendered out, with the light rendered out, and another trick that I use for the light is I could have rendered out all 60 frames needed to transition smoothly from off to on. However, all I did was rendered one frame that is off, 1 or 2 frames in the middle, and then 1 frame at the end. And then in After Effects, I can smoothly transition using the opacity of each frame in order to get a nice smooth finish. And again, what I was doing is saying the only thing that the light affects is this section here. And I would then just render this as regions. So then, let's see if After Effects lets us on. Adobe has had some issues with NVIDIA graphics cards over the last week where their programs have been glitching. They even had to send out a splash intro screen just to explain the fact that things are not great and they're fixing them. So let's hope that After Effects is working enough for me to talk you through this scene. So here we have it. And if you're new to After Effects, this might look pretty overwhelming. It's even overwhelming to me. I'm still learning After Effects, but here we go. Essentially, we just have our back plate, like I mentioned, and then each of these on top is going to change that scene, okay? So I turn them all back on. I got some color corrections and color adjustments to give it some extra color. And the main point of this is to go into our rain animation. So what I've done is I've got some composites, and all this is our video clip here that runs for about 20 seconds, and then I'm going into the next clip, okay? So what is happening here? I've got all of my individual frames that I imported into After Effects, and the way that it imports first is if I press Alt and then open square brackets and then Alt closed square. The way that frames from Keyshot import into After Effects is that you need to tell it to be one frame only. So that is the Alt open brackets and Alt close brackets. And then I would come up to the first frame, scroll down to the last frame, right click, keyframe, assist, sequence layers. And then there we have our animation as a sequence set of images. So that is all I need in this first pre-composition. Outside of that composition, I've got some stuff left over from previous attempts, so I can delete those. And I can show you here that this black section here, I've got a white solid so that you can actually see it, but without that white solid, it's just transparent, and After Effects shows it as black. Here is my clipping mask for the window only. Now I turn the window on, and you can see that I'm just grabbing the information from the window. I can turn everything else off. And then that animation just runs from start to finish. And then I can take that animation in a new composition and duplicate it so that the end is first and then the start comes after, right? So here is the end of the animation and here is the start of the animation. And what that's doing is once we get here, the end of the animation fades out and perfectly fades out to 0 so that the whole loop fades and loops perfectly, right? And then that looped rain comes into here and we can just duplicate that as many times as we want. I could do this scene for 50 hours if I wanted to and just upload this to YouTube for 10 hours, 50 hours, however long, because it's just purely a looped scene. And again, with our light, like I said, I have some regions here that I fade out. So here is 100% opacity. I fade down to 0%. Meanwhile, the frame underneath then starts to fade out. Meanwhile, that frame then starts to fade out. And again, finally, the last frame fades out completely because we rendered the original scene with the light on. Okay, has that all made sense? Let me know in the comments below if that did not make any sense. So hopefully this all comes together to have the rain falling down the window. And I just needed to render out these regions, and I could do it really quickly overnight and then import that into a solid state backdrop that I only needed to render one instance of. And then this lighting animation brings the light on. And then I duplicated that little clip, shifted it right the way to the edge, reversed that, so time reversed that clip so that the light then fades off. And the only thing that this little extra bit down here is just that final frame of the light, so that once it goes off, it stays off with that little clip there. So that's everything in Illustrator. Let's check if I'm still recording. I'm still going, it's all good. Great. We're still going. After I've got this done in After Effects, I would then save that and I can import that clip. I don't need to export, I can just import the After Effects file into Premiere Pro, where I can then loop in some different sound animations, right? So here we have some rain falling on the window. We have some car sounds as the car is driving past. And in order to make the car sound like it's going, it's outside, I've added a parametric equalizer. I've come down to generic low pass, and I've slid this equalizer across so that it's taking out any of the high frequencies, which would be here, and reducing the noise. And what that does is makes it sound like it's outside. And I've also mixed in, faded in and out some birdsong intermittently throughout the whole render. Then all that's left to do is to export. And then all that's left to do is to film 3 attempts of explaining this tutorial, only for 2 of them to fail, and I think the third one to be a relative success. That is as far as I think this animation needs to go. This has just been an experiment for me. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. Please leave a comment down below to let me know that you've made it this far. If not, and I don't get any comments, at least I've recorded this for my own records. And if a rendering client asks me in 6 months or a year to animate glass with rain falling down it, I can come back to this and see for myself. That's always what these videos are about for me. But if you learned anything in this video, please let me know down in the comments below, because I love reading about it. And don't forget to like and comment and subscribe and hit the bell button and everything else that YouTube asks you to do. And I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.